when the time comes to apply. And what I mean by that are the skills and the practices you're right now, the relationships that you're building, because these end up being almost just as important as grades. And we want to get into a little bit today and kind of talk about how some of these things relate. So you don't have to be there. You don't have to know everything. Now is actually the time for you to start to broaden perspectives. You get to develop and deepen your interests. You get to discover who you are within the setting of Berkeley Carroll in your classes, and you get to learn what you like to learn, right? You get to figure out what are the things that I'm really interested in. So think about this stage that you're in right now as you're in the exploration stage. Developmentally, you'll be ready for the other pieces as we introduce them to you. But right now, focusing on improving your skills, focusing on what you do in the classroom is going to be really important. And over the next year, what we'll end up doing is getting into some of the terminology and some of the lingo, some of what this process is really all about. We always feel like it's important for us to meet you where you are, not introduce everything at the time, but give you the opportunity to be able to take in what you're ready to take in time when you're ready for that. So know that when we begin meeting with you individually in the junior year, which is when that happens, it won't be too early and it won't be too late. We'll do more class meetings in the fall. We'll do individual appointments really starting at the end of the fall semester, and we'll work with you through the end of your process. So we're still having appointments with seniors right now and talking them through their decision-making process at this point. We will assist you in creating a list of colleges to research. We'll talk to you about the research process. We'll assist you throughout the whole process of selecting those colleges, applying to them, and then deciding on the best college fit for you. And you'll hear me use that word fit quite a bit. My colleagues and I are always talking about how colleges are a fit for students, and that it's not just college that's the best college out there. And there's going to be multiple schools that will end up being your top. So with that, we thought we would start today by starting to dispel some of these myths that might be swirling around about this process. And I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I'll do this well. Oh, my screen sharing is looking a little funky. Because I just updated my operating system. Ms. Williams, can you share?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say you should try now. It should work. But if not, I can share.
Yeah, no, it's not working right. I should have tested that before. Actually, I did test it before. I don't know why it's not working.
Give me 1 second.
Okay.
All right.
So we're going to start by dispelling some of the myths, as you can see here on this first page, that might be swirling around about this process. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what applying to college consists of, because I think it's really helpful, to vault to that piece so that you understand what that application will look like and what it comes together as when you're actually applying.
So we're going to start with our first myth, and I'm gonna read it out loud. And if you think you know the answer, unmute yourself and shout it out. Colleges don't look at my grades from 9th grade. 11th grade is what counts. Does anybody know the answer? Is this true or false?
False.
Jackson, do you want to tell me why it's false?
Well, I thought it would be very simple, right? They look at all your final grades from each year.
Yeah, it's actually, they do. So one of the things that we want you to know is that it's not just what your grades in 11th grade are. And of course, those are going to be really important grades for you because it's the most recent work that you've done when you apply to college. But colleges look at your entire transcript, right? They're thinking about who you've been as a student from 9th grade all the way to that present moment when you send your application. So even though maybe 9th grade gets off to a little bit of a rocky start, it happens. You all started 9th grade in a global pandemic. It's going to be a little bit of a different year. You went from being in person to Zoom, and you've had to do a whole other year of school through Zoom. But they are really going to be thinking about everything that you've done over the course of 4 years. They're going to look at the classes you've taken, how well you've done in those classes. And when we talk to colleges about you through our letters of recommendation, we give them a lot of context for who you are as a student. So ninth grade is important, 10th grade is important, 11th grade is important because it's going to be the most recent set of grades that you have. And then they're also going to look at your 12th grade grades, depending on how you apply. So in 12th grade, they may see those first quarter grades if you apply early, but they'll definitely see your mid-year grades if you apply regular decision. So it's not just 11th grade, all of those years count. And so that's sort of our reminder to you that you have a couple of weeks left in this school year, so you want to finish strong. Ms. Middleton, did you want to add anything?
The only thing I wanted to point out is that Jackson said something that was really important. Year end or semester end grades. So if a course is just a semester long, it's the end grade that ends up on your transcript. If it's a year long set of courses, it's that end grade, the final grade that ends up on your transcript. They don't see quarters and they don't see semesters in what would be a year-long course. So what Ms. Williams said about finishing strong is really important.
So myth number 2. Sorry. It's important to have as many extracurricular activities as possible because it looks good to colleges. And you've already seen, we say that's false. You know, I think there's always a mad dash for students to start populating their resume with a lot of different activities because they think it's going to look good to colleges, that you've filled out that full list of 10 that you'll be able to put on the Common App. But actually what colleges are most interested in is that you provide them with a little bit of depth. You know, it's not I did 10 activities, but maybe it's I did 4 or 5 things that were really important to me. And now I can show them all of the different ways I did those activities. So if you're really interested in computer science, maybe you're part of a computer science club at Berkeley Carroll, or you take coding classes in the summer. It's something that you do repeatedly and over an extended period of time. It's okay to dabble. I know some students who will go from co-curricular to co-curricular year to year, but it's also nice to show some consistency. We always say they're looking for depth, not breadth. So we want to see specific things that you're interested in over a period of time, not 15 activities that you could only devote 15 minutes to a week for 6 months. They want to see something that you've been consistently doing for 4 years that's really important to you. It also helps them understand a little bit about who you are. If you are someone who really loves community service and loves to be engaged with the community that way, to be able to show that over 4 years is really nice. But that's not how everybody approaches their extracurricular world. Other students might find that they spend a lot of time playing the guitar outside of school or reading a lot of books or writing a lot. And those are activities that also count. You just will teach you how to talk about them on the application. Ms. Middleton, are you ready for myth number 3?
I am.
Okay, I'll try not to mess this one up.
So go with myth number 3. This one is probably going to feel a little bit obvious in terms of what we're about to say and how we're going to comment on this. So I'll read it aloud. It says, the only colleges worth applying to, or the best colleges, are those in the Ivy League. And you're right. I see that Christiane has said, if it's true or false already, if it says it's a myth. Absolutely right. In previous years, your peers who are now juniors and seniors and graduates didn't usually get to this, didn't get this point until we were way into these myths. So yes, this is going to be false as well. And let me talk a little bit about this. I mean, one thing to recognize is the Ivy League is an athletic league of 8 years. Saying one thing is best because it's come together in this way, or because it's just the most selective college, is probably the wrong way to be thinking about what's going to be the best fit for you. There's all sorts of different kinds of colleges and universities across the country and outside of this country that students will find to be their best fit. There's all sorts of ways that students will think about developing that first set of criteria. Some of what they look at is what size college or university is going to be right for me. What am I thinking about majoring in? And that doesn't have to be defined by the time that you're applying to college, but sometimes it's helpful if you do have a sense of what you're planning on majoring in, or even just kind of a category. Like I'm thinking about something in the liberal arts and sciences, or I might want to do something in communications. We've developed lists of colleges with students, and then kind of scrapped it and went back because the students as juniors did a little bit more research into what they thought might be their major, and they switched their plan. And so there's plenty of time to be able to figure out some of that criteria overall. So I want you to make sure that you're getting away from the idea that best only means most selective. Our students at Berkeley Carroll apply to some of the most selective colleges across the country, but they don't have to be just those 8, right? Those 8 aren't going to be the best place for all students. And one other thing I was going to say, I'd like to say is, if you were in our office space, if you walked into our offices in 181 Lincoln, you would see that there's a plaque on the wall as you walk in, and the quote on that plaque says, "College is a match to be made, not a prize to be won." And it's attributed to Fred Hargadon, who was the director of admission at Princeton quite a while ago. And this is a philosophy that we feel is a great way to be thinking about colleges, that it's not a race to win a prize. It's really thinking about, where are you going to grow and thrive? How are you going to be that person in 5-6 years who's going to graduate from college and enter into the workforce, enter into the rest of their life in the best position possible? And I don't mean best in terms of, again, most selective. I mean best in terms of being who you are, fully, completely thriving. Let's go on to myth 4. As you know, as one of your peers pointed out, this is going to be false as well. I'll read it aloud for those of you that for everyone, so that we hear it all together. High test scores will guarantee admission to the most selective colleges. This is false. If you were part of that webinar, the seminar last night with Adam Ingersoll from Compass Prep, he talked quite a bit about testing and contextualize testing within the application process. We'll do that further with you to contextualize what test scores mean. Some of the most selective colleges out there actually are testing optional and have been for many years. I think about places like Bowdoin College or Wesleyan University, or the University of Chicago as a newer entrant into this testing optional world. They've made the decision to go testing optional because they know that really the bulk of what they're learning about an applicant goes well beyond testing. Ms. Williams, Mr. Almonte, and I have all sat at the decision-making tables at universities and colleges. We've been part of committees. And I can tell you that the amount of time that colleges and universities spend on testing goes by literally in the blink of an eye. They spend much more time looking at your writing, looking at your transcript, looking at your teacher recommendations, looking at all the parts and pieces that become that application. And we're going to go into that a little bit more this morning as well. What can high test scores do for an applicant? It really confirms all the other things that they'll see in an application. A high test score can show potential, but it's not going to be a decision maker. This process is far from just looking at test scores and GPA and making decisions. Colleges read about you, they learn about you, and they want to be an advocate for you.
Myth number 5. Colleges are hoping to read all about my experience during the COVID-19 pandemic in my essay. I think we struggled a little bit with whether or not to put this in because, of course, COVID is going to affect you all very differently than it's affecting the current senior class and even the current junior class. And so it may not be something that feels as pervasive by the time you get to write your college essay. But one thing you'll know is on the Common App, they have a place for students to talk about how COVID-19 has affected them, if it's affected them in a really negative way, maybe beyond some of the ways that we have all been affected. It's not just, oh, I had to quarantine, or it's usually if something really, really terrible has happened as a result of COVID. But when you think about your college, but we did put this in here because we want you to think about the college essay a little bit differently. It's a place where you're going to tell a part of your story that's unseen anywhere else in the application. So one of the things I like to say is that when you turn in your college application, it's a lot of other people speaking for you. Your teachers write recommendations for you. Ms. Middleton and I write, or Mr. Almonte might write a recommendation for you. Your transcript is sort of fixed, right? Like you've done your best, you took all the classes you needed to take, you got the grades you needed to get, you took the SAT or the ACT, maybe if that was your choice. But there isn't really a place in the Common App where where you get to tell your story, except for in the essay. And so we don't want you to think of the essay as having to be about one specific topic because it feels like maybe a hot button issue, but it's really a chance to tell your own personal story. One of my favorite essays ever from way back when I worked in college admissions was from a student from Chicago, right outside of Chicago, who wrote about working, volunteering at a homeless shelter and having a conversation with a gentleman there in Latin over macaroni and cheese. And there were a lot of things about that essay that were really compelling. But I got to know a little bit about how the student interacted with people outside of himself, maybe people from a different background, learning how to find common ground. And then it was a really well-written essay that told me a lot about who he was and how he might contribute to the community that I was looking to admit him into. So the essay is something, it can be about anything. You'll have many options, many prompts to choose from, or you can write about something not associated with one of those prompts. But it's a chance for you to tell your story. And so as Ms. Middleton just said, colleges will spend more time on your writing. You'll hear the term holistic a lot when colleges come to talk to you eventually about how they review applicants. And the essay is part of that holistic read. They're looking to get to know you, and they do so through your essay. It's your voice, your story, and it's the way they're going to know how you might fit into their community. That is false. Myth number 6. Berkeley Carroll only sends students to liberal arts colleges. Well, I think we also know that that is false. There's something in the chat. Yes, thank you, Jackson. On top of it. That is not true. One of the things that we're really proud of is when we look at the list of places where our students have applied, not just where they've been admitted, but all the different schools that Berkeley Carroll students have applied to. I think we did the numbers and it's over 190 colleges. I think, yes, I believe it was 193 colleges. And that means Berkeley Carroll students have applied to state universities inside New York, so maybe the SUNY system. They've applied to schools in New York City through the CUNY system. They've applied to colleges in California and schools in the EU, schools in the UK. Berkeley Carroll students applied to a multitude of schools. And the reason for that is because what works really well for one student might not work for someone else. So someone might find that they're really drawn to a smaller school with a liberal arts curriculum that'll give them the opportunity to explore lots of different areas of study, even though they may have something specific that they want to pursue. And another student might say, I really want to go to a school that's going to focus on STEM. I want to go someplace where I can study engineering really intently. That can happen at a small liberal arts college. That can happen at a large public university, but they might choose to go to a polytechnic instead. And so Berkeley Carroll students have really been very thoughtful about what kinds of schools they applied to. There are also some students who might apply to a small liberal arts college and a large university because they felt drawn to both communities for different reasons. So there isn't only one kind of school for Berkeley Carroll students to apply to. And the college office is not going to push you into applying only to small liberal arts colleges. One thing that we think is really important for you to know is that these are your choices. At the end of the day, none of us are going to be going to college with you. We're not the ones who are going to step foot on that campus. Your parents also aren't going to step foot on that campus. But that's why we want you to do lots of research to understand which kinds of schools are going to be the best fit for you. So you might find that you want to be on a large campus with 20,000 to 30,000 students and in a big lecture hall because maybe you don't love discussion-based classes, or maybe you only want to be in a school where the class sizes are under 15 students. That is possible. You can find both of those things. And you can also find both of those things in the same university. So that's why we'll really encourage you to do a lot of research, especially next year after you get your lists and start working with your counselor one-on-one to get to know all the different types of colleges that are out there. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add, I think sometimes when students are learning about this term liberal arts, they're not always sure of what that means. And if we think about the definition of a liberal arts college, the liberal arts are the humanities. So yes, it includes things like art and art history and English and languages, but they also include social sciences. So economics, sociology, political science, and then the natural and physical sciences. And liberal arts and sciences colleges will have combinations of all of these. I remember visiting a college a number of years ago in Wisconsin. Ms. Williams, you've been to Beloit as well. I was really impressed by one student who said, I'm both a theater and a physics major. And it was amazing to me to think about like how those two things combine and how you can use one to actually be part of the other, you know, learning to think creatively or learning how to, just the different ways of thinking. And I think some of our students are drawn to liberal arts colleges, but as Ms. Williams said, we've got kids going to a range of places. In this senior class, we've already got students who are committed to UCLA and University of Michigan, and those are over 31,000 undergraduates. And then we've got students who are committed to art schools. We've got students who are committed to, each year we have students who commit to historically Black colleges and universities. We've got 2 students who are committed to Harvey Mudd College, which is just over 800 students. So the range in terms of the size, the range in terms of the types of schools, and many students will pursue liberal arts and sciences within a university. So as Ms. Williams said, there's so many different combinations. It's going to be exciting to be able to figure some of this out with you.
And the only thing I'll just add to that is I think there's another myth out there that you won't have a lot of opportunities to study different things if you go to a smaller school, but I don't believe that's true at all. I think a lot of smaller schools offer the same amount of resources, maybe in a different capacity than some of the larger universities, but you can study a variety of things even at a small school. You're not going to be limited in your options. So we go to the next myth.
Yes.
Myth number 7.
Even if a college says they have a test optional policy, they'll prefer to see either the ACT or SAT. We've definitely seen this to be have I wanted to give you some perspective on before the pandemic and now while colleges have changed their testing policies during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, about 1,100 colleges were testing optional. And they would see anywhere from 25% up to 50 or more percent students choosing not to send any kind of test scores. When the pandemic hit, colleges one after another made the decision to go testing optional. So really we're talking about 2/3 of those 2,500 colleges have gone testing optional over this year and will be for next fall as well. A number of those colleges are actually in a 3-year cycle. They want to examine whether this standardized testing actually is useful in their process. They were able to adapt so well to not having testing and focusing on the other parts of the application that I think we'll see more than that cap of 1,100. I think we'll see in normal times that number is actually going to be a bit larger overall. And those colleges, when they and Ms. Williams and Mr. Almonte and I have done many, many webinars with colleges over the last year, and they've talked about how they've adapted to a testing optional world and how they've learned to do that. And they're very committed to it. You know, they're going to be really honest. You'll see in the language, and if you were part of that seminar last night, they're going to be honest if they prefer to have testing. You know, there's certainly still a few schools. I think Mr. Ingersoll last night was identifying in particular Georgetown University's language, Rice University's language. There are a few places that really are kind of connected to and Emory, thanks Jackson, that really feel like in their language, they're still connected to their testing overall. So I think we'll probably see some schools will flip back to requiring testing and others may push forward with more testing options for students overall. If you're interested in seeing that current list of schools that are testing optional, there's a great website called fairtest.org. And you just click on college admissions and you'll see that huge list huge list of colleges and universities that that are testing optional. And then there's a number of schools that have said, we don't want testing. We don't care about it. The Cal States and the UCs, for example, Bard College right near us has said they really don't trust, they don't think testing is helpful in their process. It doesn't give them the predictive value of how well you'll do in college. What most colleges, as I said a little bit before, what most colleges will say about standardized tests is it confirms what they've already read in an application. So I feel like you can trust those colleges that say that they're testing optional. It's come out in the evidence that for most colleges that have presented it that, they haven't in their statistics for the most part favored students who have presented testing.
So we're going to move on to the next section of this presentation, and afterwards we'll have time certainly for questions, but we wanted to give you an overview of how do you even apply to college? What you really need to know about the college application. So what you see here on the screen is a list of almost all of the applications that you'll encounter when you apply to college. So you'll see the Common App is the application that's used by most students. I would say probably 99.9% of Berkeley Carroll students use the Common Application exclusively to apply to college. But there are a couple of students who also decided that they were going to use the Coalition application, which is accepted by some colleges, not all. There's a list of schools that are part of the Coalition application. We find that that one is not quite as common, mostly because there are only, I think, 3 or 4 schools in the United States that exclusively use the Coalition application. So if you apply to the University of Washington, if you apply to the University of Florida, you would definitely have to use the Coalition application, but almost every other college that you'll encounter in the United States uses the Common App. Some schools will have their own application. So Georgetown University, they like to be different. They still have their own application that you would have to use. And MIT also is another school that has its own application. But most schools will accept the Common App, and you fill that one out, and it goes to every school you apply to. They'll have a couple of things that you may do a little bit differently. So we talked about the essay. You write one Common App essay and that goes to all of your schools, but some schools will say, we have a few more questions. We want you to fill out this other short answer response, this other short essay, or they may ask some specific questions about what you want to study or what college you want to be part of when you apply to that school. The other application you might use if you decide to apply to schools internationally, if you want to apply to schools in the UK, you'd use the UCAS application. If you want to apply to schools in the UC system, so University of California, that has its own application. One thing that we'll talk to you a lot more about when you get closer to the process is how to stay organized so you can keep track of all of the different applications that you might use. Although I would say most Berkeley Carroll students only ever use the Common application. Very rarely have I had a student use, I think maybe this year I worked with one student who used the Coalition application and a few who used the UC app and maybe 1 or 2 with the UCAS app. So the Common App is the one you want to get most familiar with. And then we've also listed just a couple of other applications that you might need if you're applying for financial aid. So one, and probably the most important one, is the FAFSA. That's the free application for federal student aid. And that's the one required by every college if you're applying for need-based financial aid. And that pretty general. It takes your parents' tax information and it helps generate what the school thinks that you'll be able to contribute for college tuition. The other is a CSS profile, which is a little bit more complicated and includes a lot more information that we won't go into today, but usually a lot of smaller liberal arts schools do ask for the CSS profile just so they have a stronger and bigger picture of what a family's financial situation might be. So these are, I think, the main applications you'll see. And of course, you might decide you want to go to school in the Netherlands. You might decide you want to go to school in France. Those will be different applications as well. But we want to make sure that you know that the Common App is the one that you need to familiarize yourself with the most.
Don't a lot of international schools don't really care for your essay?
Oh, that's a good question. So it depends on the school. The UCAS has a personal essay that's very different from the one that we described when we talked about the Common App essay. It's a little bit more goals oriented. They want to know specifically why you want to come to this university, what your course of study is, and what you've done to prepare yourself for that course of study. Some of the schools in Scotland, they use the Common App. Some schools in Ireland also use the Common App. And so they want to see that essay in the way that you've created one for your other schools. But yes, some schools will not want an essay at all.
Yeah, if you look at schools, and many of the schools in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
they don't require an essay except for particular programs, and they're more likely to consider your 11th and 12th grades. So things are a little bit different when you're looking at colleges and universities internationally. They're also seeing a broader international pool of applicants. So the curriculum at different countries tend to it depends upon how they favor their curriculum. It depends upon how their system is organized. So I've had students apply to only colleges in Ontario, and it was just the transcript. So no letters of recommendation and no essays. Good point.
Thanks, Jackson.
So what's in an application? We thought we'd just kind of put it out on a slide and kind of show you what the different parts and pieces of the application will look like. And we'll talk in the next slide a little bit more about the activities and involvement piece of it. I want to start with those 3 words at the bottom, though, because you've heard us use some of those words. Ms. Williams used the word holistic earlier. We talked a little bit about context and how they're kind of looking at a contextual read of an application. We haven't talked too much about rigor, but these are 3 words that you'll definitely hear colleges talk quite a bit about. Context, when I think about that, I think about how a college, and specifically if we're talking more about the colleges in the US and how they read applications, context becomes really important because they're always looking at you in the context of your high school, what's been offered at your high school. So particularly when we're talking about curriculum, and then seeing how you took advantage of those opportunities. They're looking at the context of, say, your first and second years and how the COVID-19 quarantine has not allowed you to participate in activities in the same way. Colleges understand context. They've experienced this last year in the same way that you and I have, and they will understand what that's all about. What we send with that transcript, you'll see in that first line there, it says transcript, it says profile and counselor letter. The profile is a document that we create to help colleges learn all about us. So each year we'll have about 140 colleges or so that will come and visit Berkeley Carroll. Hopefully by the time that you're juniors, we'll be doing our college fair, so you'll be able to meet a whole bunch of representatives from colleges. But even for colleges where we haven't had students apply before, the profile is something that every US high school creates to be able to help colleges understand what our curriculum is all about, what kind of programs we have that are signature programs, that are unusual programs, and we give them quite a bit of that context. There's also context of who you are and your family. There's quite a number of things that you put into your application where everybody is not going to be exactly the same. Everybody is not accessing information in the same ways. So when colleges are thinking about their applicant pool, context becomes important because they're seeing students from all over the world. So they rely on this information to help them understand who you are in the context of your school. Our counselor letters help to do that as well. I always think about the differences between these letters of recommendation. One is a floodlight. So what Ms. Williams and Mr. Almonte and I get to write about you, we interview you, we have your anecdotals, we have your transcript to look at, we have questionnaires that you've filled out, and we try and provide a little bit more of that context. We're 2 courses offered at the same time, so you couldn't take this one. Where did you grow the most? What are some things that teachers outside of those 2 teachers that write you letters of recommendation, what were some of the comments that they used? And how did you make use of the opportunities that you had outside of the classroom? What's become important to you? So we feel that provides quite a bit of the context overall. Ms. Williams talked about how colleges will say that they read applications holistically. what that does mean is they do care about all of these things. For schools that have portfolios and auditions, for schools that have interviews, those are going to be things that they care about. If they require an essay, that is something that they're going to be caring about. They might do this in lots of different ways, depending upon whether, you know, it's a different country that you're applying to, or a large research university, smaller college, what they're able to access and what they're able to require from you. But I would say that the holistic read, what it doesn't mean is that they're going to ignore your transcript. The transcript is always going to be the most important part of your application. They'll look for growth in that transcript. You'll notice as you're choosing courses for your junior year, we know you made those selections. Then as you make course selections for your senior year, you're typically taking more and more advanced level courses. So even if you don't realize it, your American Studies course that you choose last year, we label as an advanced course because we want colleges to know that that's a challenging course for our students, and that when students do well in that course, that means something, and it's particularly important. If you didn't have the opportunity to be able to attend the session last night with Compass Prep, Adam Ingersoll is the guy in charge, and he's someone who's quite reliable and quite straightforward. As soon as we get the recording of that meeting, we'll send it out to you so you can look at it, you can re-look at it, and it'll give you a better sense of how standardized testing fits into all this. And I guess the one piece I didn't mention in here is teachers' letters of recommendation from teachers. These are also incredibly important. When I think about that transcript, it's a flat piece of paper. What the teacher letters of recommendation provide are those hills and valleys, you know, those points that they can't just get from a GPA, they can't just get from a grade, the understanding of who you are as a student in the classroom. And that's what becomes real and becomes readily available to college admission officers as they're reading about you and thinking about how you might fit into the classrooms at their schools. Do you want to add anything there, Ms. Williams? Or
no, I think that was everything. I think we just wanted to just give you a little bit of a closer look at those activities that we talked about. We don't want, as we said, the activities could be many, many things. And we've given you just a little bit of a sense of what that looks like, right? So if you are a member of the Key Society, or maybe you're on the Spirit Squad, you're on the swim team, those all of course count as your activities, but they could also be externships that you held if you shadowed somebody for a few weeks, getting to understand a particular career. If you're on the honor council, or you're a peer leader eventually, part-time work experience, right? Like some students, they have part-time jobs. They have part-time jobs during the school year, and that counts too. I always think this, whenever I look at this, I think a lot about once when I was working in admissions, and we were talking about a student that we weren't sure about their activities, what they were doing. The student had put that they spent a lot of time caring for a younger sibling who had a disability. And that meant that student didn't have time to participate in a lot of different clubs and activities after school. And we honored that as part of their extracurricular life. It wasn't always stuff that was happening at school. Sometimes it's things that happen at home. So there are so many different ways that you can categorize activities and what you do as part of your extracurricular life. If you're a member of an affinity group, that counts, that's important. And so we just wanted to make sure that you can see, in real time what all of this what this will actually look like when you're applying to college. And this is actually a snapshot of how the activities section on the Common Application looks. So you can see the student has been participating on the swim team since 9th grade, 10 hours a week for 40 weeks a year, right? That's the most important thing that they do. And so they put it first. Anything else about activities?
no, we've got about 5 minutes. So if it's a short window for questions, but if there are questions that you want us to address now or think about for the next seminar that we have with you, you're welcome.
Sydney?
It's just like a quick question, but like, how do we figure out GPAs and stuff?
That is a good question. So we will calculate a GPA for you at the end of well, actually, I think we don't really calculate them until the fall of your junior year. And the first GPA you'll get to see is a combination of 9th and 10th grade. And we'll use that as we sort of start framing your college process. One thing that I think we haven't talked about, but it's important for you all to know, is we actually don't calculate a GPA that goes out to colleges. So the GPA that you'll see on SCORE when you get access to that eventually is actually something we only use internally. And there's a good reason for that. And that reason is when colleges get your transcript, and I know this because when I worked in admissions, I would get to open this is back in the ancient times, I would open a paper file, pull out the transcript, look to the bottom, see where that GPA is, and I would write down that number. And of course, I would go back and look at all the classes that the student took, but it was really easy for me to just rely on that number when I was thinking about who the student was. We're actually asking our colleges when they get a student from Berkeley Carroll, when they get their application, to have to take a much closer look at all of the things you've accomplished over the course of your 4 years. We want them to see that you took a class maybe in, I don't know, post-colonial Nigerian literature, and we want them to see like the result of that class. And we want them to, next, you guys are all in your, you all are all in your electives that you chose in. We want to make sure that those are highlighted when colleges look at your transcript. So we don't want them to reduce it to a GPA, even though we do use it internally to help you make some of your choices about where you might apply and why.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And there are a couple of questions in the chat. One of the questions is, do we rank you? We do not. There is no Berkeley Carroll rank.
No, there's no ranking. And then I see, I'm assuming because AP classes aren't here, there isn't a GPA over a 4.0. No, when we calculate the GPA, that internal GPA, and again, it's not produced for colleges, we calculate it internally. It's also calculated as an unweighted GPA. If I'm on the college side, colleges see all sorts of kinds of transcripts. They'll see all sorts of kinds of curriculum. They see grades on a 7-point scale, an 11-point scale. Schools that have no grades, they have A through F grading scales. And there's quite a few independent schools. In fact, I would probably say the majority that don't do a cum GPA, like a cumulative. And it's for the same reasons that Ms. Williams had mentioned. There are schools out there, however, that will do an unweighted GPA, a weighted GPA. They'll do all sorts of different kinds of calculations, and colleges themselves, they sometimes do calculate a GPA. The most often way that they will calculate it, especially if we're talking about liberal arts and sciences colleges and universities, is they will do an unweighted GPA. So they won't have a specific kind of weight to it for more advanced. Colleges will know which courses are advanced. We give them a full list with our school profile, and we also give them right on the transcript. It'll indicate which courses are indicated as an advanced level right there. So they'll know which courses are challenging within our curriculum, and they'll know all of the courses available.
Yeah, because right, because like some people that I know who go to public school, like they have like their GPAs are like above 4.0. So I'm assuming that like, since those are like AP classes, which we don't have, like a GPA that's like a 4.5 at public school, that they're taking like 15 AP classes, versus like someone here who's not taking any AP classes but still has like a really good GPA. Are they the same, or is the 4.5 higher than like the 3.9?
A great question. Think about it as apples and oranges. They're very different, and they'll always have to be looked at in their own context. So that's why we keep using that word context and saying that colleges look at what's available at your high school, how are things organized at your high school in terms of grades and those kinds of scales, and they won't be comparing the student from the public school that might have the over 4.0 GPA to our school. It just doesn't, it's not an apples to apples comparison.
And there is another question in the chat about when to take the SAT or the ACT. Is that something that we decide, or is it up to the student? So one thing we'll do, especially in this fall, you'll start to get more information from us about standardized tests, taking in standardized test prep. You will ultimately decide, maybe working with your college counselor or working with your tutor, if you have one for the SAT or a class you're taking, when the best time for you to be taking the test. Most students will take their first SAT or ACT in the spring of their junior year. Sometimes students will take that March exam or that April exam, and then often they'll take another exam in June or even later in the summer in August. So it's up to you. It's when you feel ready. We don't want to push you into taking something if you haven't done sufficient prep.
And we will offer classes. So we'll roll out some of that information at the appropriate times as well, so that you're fully informed about what options are out there. I think we're at 10:51. So I think
we're at 10:51, but there was one more question that came in to me, and this is a really good one that I think is helpful to answer. If there's no way to GPA, is there an advantage in taking advanced courses? And the answer is yes. There's always an advantage in taking advanced courses, because what you're demonstrating to the colleges is that you appreciate a challenge and that you are willing to work hard in courses that may not be the easiest thing at Berkeley Carroll. And what they're looking to see is, can you do the work at a college level? And so you're already going to take American Studies, but maybe if you're interested in sciences, you may want to think about taking an advanced chem class, or if you take physics as a junior and senior year, you may want to take that quantum physics, which we offer at Berkeley Carroll now, because our students are so good. So yes, if you have the opportunity to take advanced classes, and if it's appropriate for you, then we encourage you to do so. But if it's a class that you're not ready for, we also don't want to push you into something that's going to say like that maybe will bring your grades down in a way that's not necessary.
so. With that, we want to say thank you for your attention, and we look forward to seeing you again, and hopefully seeing you in person soon. Thanks so much.